Hello, welcome to You Control Mind Mastery session number 3. By now, I would expect you to have made at least some progress. Your SARI scores ideally should be lower, and when you do your GSR readings, ideally they should be higher. At least the baseline should be higher, and your ability to maintain stability or recover from stress should be much faster. Now, of course, if you're putting all the links in the chain of command that I've given you so far, and you're doing it consistently, the scores will be lower on the SARIs, the 4-part SARIs, and the GSR readings will be higher. Let's check it out, shall we? I'm going to review all of the links that I've given you so far, add a little extra perspectives here and there. And for every link that I ask you about, you can give yourself a point for if you can say yes when I ask, have you done this? And I will still be generous and give you a half a point if you say that you've done it somewhat. And I'm not talking about your success with the use of this, just that you have used it and as consistently as possible. So here goes. Question number 1. Have you assumed control for your subconscious mind and reinforced that control regularly with a breathing exercise? Have you? That means, have you taken full charge for yourself? Now, the breathing exercise is to condition your subconscious to work with you. By taking charge of something your subconscious normally does for you automatically, you have to get its attention. And of course, once you have its attention, the idea is to take charge and to say to your subconscious, from now on, I'm assuming responsible conscious control. And of course, then your subconscious ideally responds with, good for you, I'm happy to work with you. Now, I want you to understand something. The breathing exercise for the You Control Mind Mastery is more meditative. Those of you who practice hypnosis and have experienced hetero-hypnosis know that hypnosis is letting go. Kind of just, what you say, let it all hang out, become neutral. Whereas the You Control breathing is to take charge, to grab a hold of, get a handle on, and take charge. So you need your full attention and concentration throughout the breathing process and while you're taking charge and giving the command. If your mind wanders off, you become kind of loose mentally and be neutralized and sort of your mind wanders and drifts and so on. That means that you're not concentrating, of course, and then you need to start all over again. That happens a lot in hypnosis. In hypnosis, people sort of get neutral. They could care less. They just relax mentally as well as physically and often emotionally too. So the idea of the You Control breathing is to take hold of, to be in charge of the whole process continuously. And then once you hold the breath, as they say, that's when you give the command. Now, if you're not able to get to 10 and you take over at another number, that must be determined beforehand. And if your breathing capacity allows, most people get to 10 fairly comfortably. Some people need to take over at 7 or 8, something like that. Always do the breathing from way down here, through your nose. Any breathing that's done through the mouth should always be on the exhale. But when you've got that breath held to the count of 10, as you're breathing in and you say, I control, relax, or whatever it is that you say to yourself, your open sesame or your magic words, however you would like to think of them. When you breathe in, you say, I control, relax. While you hold the breath, that's when you give the command. That's when you're taking responsible conscious control. And you're letting your subconscious know that you're sincere, you're genuine, you mean business. So that's link number 1. It's a double link, but you still only get 1 point if you're doing that. And I do mean regularly, at least once a day. The more, the better. And the second link begins the chain. And of course, without the second link, doing number one isn't going to do you a lot of good, because the second link, the question is, have you taken full responsibility for yourself? Have you? And everything that happens to you, physically, mentally, and emotionally? If you've done that, you not only have a point, but you probably feel better. The world looks much better to you. You handle things better, because when you're responsible, you're more likely to participate in your own life more fully, in the sense that you're not going to feel like a victim anymore. You're not going to feel like a leaf in the wind or a victim of accident and circumstance. You are going to be saying, this is my life, this is my body, these are my emotions, these are my thoughts, and I'm in charge of them, and I'm going to see to it that they're going to be healthy. You're responsible for how you respond to what happens to you in the external world. You're responsible for what happens to you in the internal world. Everything from your skin to deep within yourself is your responsibility. I'm not talking about responsibility for everything that happens out there. That you contribute to. You also contribute to other people's responses. However, you're not responsible for other people. You're not responsible for everything that goes on in the world. You are responsible for you. Nobody else, just for you. And how you live up to that responsibility is up to you. That means you can't blame anybody else anymore. You can't blame your mother, your teacher, your psychologist, you can't blame your husband, you can't blame your boss, you can't blame the world. It's all yours. You're responsible for how you respond and what you do with what comes within your realm of experience. So, if you've taken full responsibility for yourself and everything that happens to you, physically, mentally, and emotionally, you have a point. You also have much, much more control of your life. Now you have started the chain of command. You have assumed responsible, conscious control for your subconscious mind, and now you've taken responsibility for yourself and everything that happens to you from this moment on. If you didn't do it this week, then do it now, because you're responsible for not being responsible. Keep that in mind. That's the catch-22. Anyway, as I asked you before, is there anybody else in this world that you would want to hand yourself over to, physically, mentally, and emotionally? To give them complete charge? I don't think so. The only person in this world that you can trust to be responsible for you is you. And putting all the other links in the chain of command help you live up to that responsibility healthfully and positively, and helps your subconscious know that you're going to do your part positively. The third link is, have you developed a positive new concept of and for yourself? Have you? If you have another point. Keep in mind that a concept is a general notion or idea about something. Think about that. We talked about that last time when I drew the vase, or I say vase, on the blackboard, and you drew one almost identical probably, and yet we all know there are millions of ways to draw vases. And these ideas are something that are formed mentally, and they combine all kinds of the characteristics and particulars of a particular construct. So when you conceptualize yourself, you are basically saying, this is who I am, this is how I am, this is how I present myself to the world, this is the way I think of myself, this is the way I conduct myself. That can indeed confine or free you. Because if your concept of yourself is negative or limited in some way, that's the way your life is going to be. That's the way you're going to function in the world. This is the greatest handicap there is a negative concept of yourself. So you really and truly need to make sure that your concept of yourself and for yourself is very positive. people often say to me, well, my problem is I have a negative self-image, or I have a negative self-concept. Instinctively we know that that's not helpful, because it tends to sort of put a negative overlay on everything. And once you conceptualize yourself in that way, it's almost like you have a subconscious script for that. Let me give you an example. I had a gentleman in my weight seminar one time, and he was a very, very large man. He took up a whole love seat. And he was somewhat resistant to making positive changes in his eating habits. And as I began to investigate through the processes that I guide people through in that, I realized that, and I asked him, I said, Brent, how do you conceptualize yourself? When you think about yourself, what comes to mind? How do you see yourself? And to everyone's amazement, he said, svelte. We all went, wow, that's interesting. But that also explained one thing. Actually explained many things. It explained why he was resisting changing. Because once you have a concept of yourself in some way, it's like I say, it's almost like having a script for it. It's part of an overall blueprint. And since he saw himself in his mind's eye as svelte, he didn't think of any reason to change anything. Everything else was just a generalized notion too about that. I said, come on. When you look at yourself in the mirror, or when you go to buy clothes, Brent, surely then you see your size much more objectively. He said, well, actually, he said, I very seldom go buy clothes. He said, I just call my tailor and say, well, you've got the measurements, just go ahead and make me another suit. And he did a lot of business travel, and a lot of people in his business traveled to see him from various countries. And he said that when they would say to him, well, how will I recognize you at the airport? He said, well, I'll wear a red carnation. And it would have been very difficult to miss Brent at the airport anyway. After we were able to readjust his concept of himself to be objective and realistic, then he was able to shift and make a more positive one of someone who was now changing physically and mentally and emotionally and behaviorally. And we knew when he had made that shift. When his wife came into the seminar, because she had participated with him, and she said, Brent won't be able to make it this evening. She said, but he wants me to give you a message, Elaine. She said, he's going to meet a gentleman from Japan at the airport this evening. And when the gentleman asked him, how would he recognize Brent at the airport, Brent said, look for 2 Sydney Greenstreets in one suit. Now we could make progress, because Brent had, first of all, an objective view of himself. And I'm saying objective, it's very, very important. I'm not asking you to create some fantastic, irrational, illogical concept of yourself. I want you to be objective. Most people are not. They tend to lean towards the negative. They're very self-critical. You don't need to be overly critical. Be objective. Look at all the qualities and characteristics and traits and all those good things about yourself, and conceptualize yourself based on your power to change whatever there is within you and about you that you choose to, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Also, that has to be realistic. Obviously, if you're 6 foot tall and you only want to be 5'4", you're going to have to change your concept of how attractive it is to be 6 foot. But the point is making the best of what you've got and bringing out the best in you. If you can begin to do that with your self-concept, not only do you have a point, but you feel better about yourself. Now, the 4th link is, are you monitoring your thoughts and canceling the negative thoughts immediately? If you're doing that, you have a point. That's a double link. Are you monitoring your thoughts? In other words, listening in to your own thoughts. Because not only what you think is what you get, but of course everything that comes to consciousness, if it's not corrected, if it isn't given some directive to go back down to your subconscious with, It's as is. So if it's a negative thought and you haven't corrected it, if you haven't canceled it, it goes right back down to your subconscious as is, as if it's acceptable. So any negative thoughts must be rejected immediately, and your subconscious needs to know it's not acceptable. You can simply say, cancel it. I had a lady in my office one time, and she'd really got the point, but she was still learning in the process, but almost everything she'd say after she'd said it, and she'd, no, cancel that. And then she'd say something else and cancel that, or she'd be thinking of, no, cancel that. And I heard the word cancel a lot in my office that day, but that was a sign that she was very much aware, and she was taking responsibility for those thoughts, and she was putting the correct definition on them, acceptable or not acceptable. And that's good. That's what you need to do. Next question. Are you living in the now? Are you living in the now? Good question. Good way of living. You cannot move forward if you're dragging the past along with you, nor can you see where you're going if you're keeping your future up front of everything you do. If you live in the now, your focus on what you're doing and what you're experiencing gives you a sense of fully living your life, participating absolutely, and having much more control over that. Because if your focus is in the past, where things have perhaps been disturbing or painful or whatever was there, and that's on your mind right now, and you really need to be doing whatever you're doing at this moment, but that's clouding it, that's interfering, you can't move forward and you can't be productive. By the same token, if your perspective is in the future, and while you're supposed to be living in the now, you keep thinking about the future and being concerned about it in some way, you are interfering with how you create your future and how you're creating your past. So live in the now. And I will tell you, the troubles of the past and the concerns of the future doesn't mean they're irrelevant, but they may be irrelevant now. Sometimes it's relevant to think about the past. Sometimes it's relevant to think about the future. But you really need to be objective about that too. Keep your mind on what you're doing. Live in the now. I have a saying that the way I work in my head is I do what I'm doing while I'm doing it. I'm right here. I've often had people tell me when they've been with me in my office, I just feel you're really here. Your concentration is right with me. And it's true, because when I'm with someone, they are the only person in the world that exists. That moment is the only moment that has any meaning for me at that time. And when you live your life like that, you have a lot more energy. Life is not the burden that it can be if you carry the past with you or the future with you. Live in the now. The sixth link. Have you done everything that you can to develop a positive attitude about and for yourself, which will result in more positive thinking? The thinking is simply a measure of your attitude. Attitude is where you get the resources for your thoughts. The attitude is the well that you dip into to nourish your thoughts. So it's very, very important to have a positive attitude about and for yourself. And automatically then, that double link will be in place, because you will be thinking more positively when your attitude is more positive. It's not difficult to develop a positive attitude. A lot of people say to me, well, I don't know how to do that, Elaine. That's not so easy to do. What do you think it's easy to carry around the negative one? I don't think so. It's much easier to change it. And it's not complicated to do it either. It's not a complex issue. Turn it around. It comes from way down deep inside of you, deep in your mind, deep in your emotions, your attitude. It's a whole feeling, a whole sense of yourself. When you have a positive attitude, a genuinely positive attitude, once it's fully taken root, it will absolutely be impervious to the negative. It's true, you know. That's why when your thoughts are positive but your attitude isn't, they fall down very quickly under the pressure of the negative things that can happen in life. There are many negative things that can happen to people. You can deal with them positively when your attitude is positive. You may not be laughing about it, you may genuinely be sad and crying about it, but you're dealing with it positively. You're not going to allow it to sink you. My positive attitude is absolutely impossible to contaminate. I can have negative people all around me. It doesn't make any difference to my attitude at all. And that's another measure of how well you're doing in developing a positive attitude. When it is less vulnerable to other people's input, less vulnerable to other people's attitudes. So, if you're thinking more positively, that's a very good sign that your attitude is much more positive. It's a feeling. Develop it within yourself. Emulate other people with positive attitudes. Play act, if you like, until it becomes second nature to you. All right? The seventh link. Are you still learning how you use words as symbols? And of course, this is a double link. Are you canceling any undesirable symbols in your language immediately? Now we talked about I can't, always, never, normally. Those we talked about. Let's talk about a couple of others, shall we? I'll tell you some of the most common words used in people's vocabulary on a daily basis. I should, I ought to, I must, I have to. Sound familiar? How many times in a day do you use that kind of language? The symbolic reference of that language on the subconscious level is that I am not a free person. I don't have any choice. Number one, it isn't even true. It's a long way from the truth. Because the truth is, no matter what, no matter who, you have a choice. I remember a lady in this program one time, and she was a very high-level educator, very bright lady, but I could see her in the group and she was going. So I said to her, what seems to be the problem? And she said, but it's not true, Elaine. There's a lot of things I have to do that I don't have any choice about. I said, such as? And she's, well, for example, she said, I have to get up and get my children off to school in the morning. I said, no, you don't. You choose to do that. Oh, she said, no. She said, I'd really rather lie in bed. She said, but I have to get up there because otherwise the children will not get to school. They won't serve their own breakfast properly. They won't eat right. They won't dress right. They won't get out on time. I said, so what? She said, well, I couldn't do that. I said, that's exactly right. You choose not to do that. There are a lot of parents who don't get up and make the children breakfast and don't see them dressed well and get off on time. They choose not to. You've chosen to. And if you lose sight of the fact that you choose to do things, you want to know something? You're not going to like doing them. You're going to resist and you're going to mumble and grumble and carry on. And all the time, it's your choice. You could choose to lie in bed. You say, well, I might lose my job. It's a choice that you have not made for yourself. If you get up and go to work in the morning, you've chosen to do that. Why? Because you want to pay the light bill, you want to keep the heat on, you want to pay the rent, you put food on the table. That's your choice. And it goes right down to the nth degree in life. Because if somebody put a gun to your head and said, you will do this, you could choose to let them pull the trigger. Because you're still in control, it's your choice. The moment you lose touch with your free will, you've lost a piece of yourself to yourself because you did it yourself. And you're going to resent doing a lot of things that you really have a choice about. So I should, and I have to, and I ought to, and I must are not true. Keep in mind that you're making a choice. Those words sound on the subconscious level that I am being denied my free will, and therefore I'm going to resist. So haven't you noticed, even if you didn't want something to begin with, when you might not have even wanted that, and somebody said, well, you can't have that, and you go, oh, who says so? And if you want something and somebody says, well, you can't have that, part of you resists that. That's instinct. You have free will. You make choices. No one can tell you what to do and what not to do. It comes from within you. You make the choice. Something else about this is very important. And I hear this a lot. A lot of language has labels in it. Powerful and very often negative labels. And this fact corresponds with not just the words, the language that you use. It corresponds with the concept you have of yourself. It corresponds with attitude and everything else. But once you put a label on yourself, I can almost guarantee that you will live up to it. I'll give you an example again from case history. A young gentleman as a client who claimed that he'd been in every known institution in Michigan, including some of its prisons, because of his drinking problem. And the way he described himself, he said, I'm a hopeless alcoholic. And we talked about this, and I pointed out to him that first of all, there's no such thing as hopeless. And anyway, it wasn't a good idea to refer to himself as an alcoholic. And he said, but that's what I am. He said, when I went to AA, I was told that I had to stand up and pronounce to the world that I am an alcoholic. I said, you are what you say you are. And it just so happened that day I had one of those little brown plastic pill bottles. One of my clients had asked me to look up some things about in the PDR. And I held it up to him and still had the prescription label on it and so on, and I handed it to him and I said, what is in this? And he read the label and he said, well, Tegretol. I said, well, Tegretol happens to be an anticonvulsant. I said, are you sure that's what's in there? And he said, well, that's what's on the label. I said, you could be seriously mistaken. I said, there could be absolutely nothing in there. It could be empty. It could be full of aspirin. It could be full of a lot of different things. But you're making the assumption that what's on the label is in the bottle, right? And he said, yes. He said, why would I think anything else? I said, that's the problem, you see. That's exactly the way your subconscious thinks. When you put a label on something, it's like the druggist, the chemist, and the prescriber. It will do everything in its power to fill the prescription. So if you say that I'm an alcoholic, the struggle to not drink may be very intense. You can say, I'm a non-drinker, or I have had problems in the past with alcohol. I choose not to have them anymore. And once you've put a different label on yourself, your subconscious will do everything in its power to live up to that prescription, to fill that prescription. So watch your language, and how you use words as symbols has an enormous power on how you feel and how you act. So watch your language and cancel any negative and undesirable symbols immediately. You may recognize them after the fact. Ideally, you all get into the habit, you might say, of recognizing them before the fact. And don't let anybody else put labels on you either, for that matter, and don't you put labels on other people. People say, I'm a this, and I'm a that, and I'm a the other, and then they proceed to be a this, that, or the other. Change it. Next question. Are you doing body scans and dialoguing with your body? Now, Those body scans and those dialogues with your body enhance your relationship with your body, will fine-tune your awareness so that you'll be much more aware of subtle changes in your body, and the way you feel about your body will improve. You'll have a lot more respect for it. And healing it will be easier. You may not know it really well now, but you will get to know it. And the better you get to know it, the more control you're going to have for your body and of your body. And it's very important, because you are not a separate entity from your body. Your mind, your body, and your emotions are like one. And so harmonizing with your body and feeling comfortable with your body and learning to work with your body more healthfully overall will enhance your sense of well-being about yourself. You'll be able to improve your health. You may be already discovering some things about your body that you didn't know before. I had a gentleman in class one time. He came in and he said, I had an amazing experience. He said, I was doing a body scan, and he said, and I had had a little bit of discomfort, so I focused on this particular part of my body, and he said, and I asked my body what the problem was, and he said, you've got an infection in the transverse colon. And he said, oh wow, I didn't know I had one. But he was so curious about it. It wasn't a real serious problem. He wasn't in a lot of pain. He was just uncomfortable and had some other symptoms. But he started immediately working and telling his body to heal and telling his subconscious to generate some more antibodies to destroy this infection. But he was very concerned about it, so he went to his doctor. He wanted to get a diagnosis and make sure he was treating himself properly, very wisely. And he just told the doctor what the symptoms were. And the doctor did some tests and came back to him and said, you know, you have an infection in your colon. And he said, oh, I thought it was in the transverse colon. He said, well, actually it is. He said, but I didn't know you had one. And that told him that he had done a very accurate diagnosis in a way. Now, you have to be careful. You're not to be your own physician at this point. But what you can do, certainly, is help your physician and help your body to heal you by being much, much more aware and much more in tune of that process. And certainly every time you do a body scan, encourage your body to be healthy. Always tell your subconscious and your body to work together for your health. And of course, you are to do dialogues with your subconscious. That's another link. Are you doing dialogues with your subconscious? Very, very important. I would actually say crucial. Now, I will explain to you the reason. Now, I'm going to share something with you, and for many, many years I didn't share this with people because, first of all, I felt that not only was it personal and private, but I felt that using myself as an example may not be particularly helpful. I'm not here to show off what I can do. I'm here to show you how you can be in control for yourself. But it was many years ago, I would say 34 years ago, something like that. Let's not worry about those details. I was told by a physician that if I lived another 6 months, I would be lucky. And very frankly, at that time, when I was given the diagnosis and the prognosis, I went, I was sort of relieved. It really wasn't such a bad thought that I would only have to be suffering like that for another few months. So I began to plan my exit, you might say. And I was doing the best I could to do this in as gracious as possible manner, because I had 2 little children at the time and ended up with 4. And I didn't want to just die and not have any plans for them or thoughts about what was going to happen afterwards. So I thought, well, what do? I really would like my children and my husband to be with my family. And, well, I can't just call my mother or write to my mother and say, dear Mum, I'm dying. Will you please have Don and the kids for me? So I thought, well, I know what I'll do. I'll have them go over for a visit and then just leave them there, that sort of thing. All these different things were going through my mind. And one night I was lying in bed and I was planning this all out, and then a thought came to my consciousness was, do you realize you're planning your own death? And I sort of casually said, well, somebody's got to do it. And then the thought came, well, you're doing it as though it belongs to somebody else. You're not involved, as one might be, emotionally with this. Well, that wasn't an unfamiliar thought anyway. And while I was thinking about a response to that, the next thought came, do you want to die? And my response to that was, well, I sure as heck don't want to go on living like this, when every moment was a struggle. So that's not the question. Let me rephrase the question. Do you want to live? Well, of course I would like to live. I have 2 children and a husband, and I'm very young. And the answer to that was, would you like to learn how? And I began to continue the dialogue with my subconscious, because that's what it was. The death that I was anticipating at that point was a door opener for me, because letting go of my life as it was enabled me to get in touch with my subconscious. Don't get to that point. Your subconscious knows everything there is to know about you, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It is a marvelous resource for insight, awareness, and understanding. My subconscious literally taught me how to live. It told me what I was doing wrong. Actually, mind mastery evolved from those days. At that time, in those days, I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a teacher. It was trial and error, you might say. I had to learn from experience and work with my subconscious. And it took me a long time to evolve. It doesn't have to take you nearly so long, because now all the tools are going to be presented to you. I had to create and develop the tools. And here I am. Well and healthy, because I've decided that's what I want for myself. So when you dialogue with your subconscious, keep in mind that it is a resource to help you live your life better. It will be honest with you if you let it. If you open yourself up to the answers to the questions that you pose to your subconscious, listen. When you ask your subconscious a question, don't try to figure out the answer. You're not analyzing this. You're not trying to figure it out. You're asking a question. So don't ask why. Why is not a good question. Why actually happens to be a rather intimidating question. And it will probably prevent you getting an answer that is meaningful. Think of it this way. Your subconscious is sort of childlike in its orientation to life and experience the world and so on. And your conscious mind is rather like an adult in its orientation. So let's think of it this way. You ask a child a question, for example, why did you do that? The child most often is going to say what? Because, which is the grand explanation, right? Or it's going to say, I don't know, which is the great buyout response. Why is not a good question. Anything but why can be helpful. What? How? Ask, what do you want to know? What do you really want to know? And pose your question in the form of what you want to know. Not, why did this happen to me? Or why did you do that? Actually, that's a good thing to learn when you communicate with other people. Don't ask other people, why did you do that? Because you're going to put them on the defensive. They feel they've done something wrong. They're going to defend themselves and then perhaps rationalize. Now that's the conscious mind, keep in mind. The conscious mind is like the adult. So when you ask an adult, why did you do something? One of the things they're going to do is try to justify it, try to rationalize it. Then you've got yourself locked in, because on the subconscious level you ask why and it says because, and on the conscious mind you say this is the rationale, and therefore you've justified it. You've just given yourself the reason to continue to do this. Not a good idea, correct? So, dialogue with your subconscious. I have a compendium of tapes that I have created for people who are doing mind mastery training. And if you would like to purchase any of the tapes in the Mind Mastery Compendium, feel free to ask about it. One of the most popular tapes in the compendium happens to be Dialoguing with the Subconscious. It's a very in-depth class, you might say, or workshop in how to dialogue with your subconscious. I think it's crucial. All right, the next link in the chain. Are you giving yourself the mental experience of succeeding and acting as if it's true? Double link. When you give yourself the mental experience of succeeding, remember, you're creating memories that become blueprints, that become ways for your subconscious to act out for you. And when you do that, think of it this way. You're writing a script for yourself. We all feel better when we have a script for something. This is why modern day trainers often tell people to do video portrayals of themselves, to act out a situation so that they can have some experience doing that. Like job interviewing and things like that. They say, let's do a script of this, so that you have the experience and therefore you're going to feel more comfortable in it. But there's a lot of experiences in life that we haven't had and we don't have scripts for them, but you can create them. So when you give yourself that mental experience of succeeding, you're also giving yourself a script. And it can be very powerful. What about role playing? Because we all do that. A lot of people say, well, I really don't know how I could do that because I've never done it before. You could act it out and role play it. Now, we all role play. It happens to be part of our life script to be able to do that. We play different roles. We play the roles of a wife or a husband, a daughter or a son. We play the role of a boss or an employee. We play all kinds of different roles. We play the role of a neighbor. So we play roles and we slip in and out of these roles to our convenience rather automatically. And we think nothing of it usually. It just seems to happen very nicely for most of us. If the role playing that you're doing now is very uncomfortable and you want to write a new script, you kind of have to write the script and play the role. I remember when I first came to America, I was really frightened of the kind of storms that you have here, particularly if there were tornado warnings along with them. And the sirens on the police cars and ambulances and everything here sounded very, very much to me like the sounds that I heard during World War II of the air raid warnings and the all clears. And so I would sort of beeline down for the basement. And it was very unnerving. And then when my children got old enough to know what was going along, I didn't want them to see my fear. So I would act like a brave mother instead of a scared child. I would even take the child by the hand and say, let's go to the window and watch this magnificent performance nature is putting on for us. And do you know something that happened as a result of that? None of my children are afraid of storms, and neither am I. In fact, I go to the window now and I look out and I truly do appreciate the magnificent performance nature is putting on. I have no fear anymore. I still don't like the idea of tornadoes, but I don't panic and I don't get so afraid anymore. I just deal with it rationally. Because I role-played myself into it so well. I convinced myself. And you play a part long enough and you play it with conviction, it becomes you. I'm not a scared child. I am a brave mother in that sense. So you can play any role that you want. Play it with conviction. All right? Of course, you must act as if it's true. That's a double link. There's no point in creating this scenario for yourself or acting on the outside while in the inside you're saying, oh boy, this isn't for real. I don't believe this. Act as if it's true. Pretend. Make believe. You did that when you were a child. Listen to those words. Make believe. You make yourself believe. Okay. Now, the 11th link, are you creating a positive new blueprint of and for yourself? Again, you're mapping it out. If you're doing that, you have a much more definite sense of direction. You have specific plans to operate with. You feel more secure, and your subconscious knows what resources it's going to need to give you to work with in your life once you have that blueprint. So the 11th link, are you creating a positive blueprint of and for yourself, mapping it out, and then of course acting on it as quickly as possible. You can adjust that blueprint as you go along. You may not like it at some point. You may want to change something. It doesn't fit properly, or it isn't working properly. You can adjust it. It's not absolute. Be flexible. The people that really make it are the people who are flexible. They adjust. Okay. The next link. Did you decide what to do? Did you take command on a moment-by-moment basis? If you did, not only do you have more time, more energy, but you really feel alive. You really are not a robot anymore. Everything that you had done before has now new dimension, new fabric, new texture, a whole lot of things in your life that weren't there before. So you really enjoy your life more. It means more to you. So decide what to do. Your concentration will be better, and by the way, so will your memory. There's two links that really enhance memory and concentration. That's living in the now and deciding what to do. Powerful links for concentration and memory. People who live in the now have very good memories, and people who decide what to do on a moment-by-moment basis have good memories. And having good concentration enhances memory and vice versa. So you should be feeling a lot better in that department too. So take command on a moment-by-moment basis. It doesn't take any more time to do that. Actually, it takes less time. People say, oh gosh, Elaine, you can't do that all day long. You'd be doing nothing else. Or you shouldn't be doing anything unless you make a decision to do it, or even make a decision to do it automatically, to hand it over to your subconscious. Don't be a robot. Don't sleepwalk. The 13th link is to have you added to the list of all the things you've learned to do that you now do automatically. And if you're doing that, you are increasing your confidence. You're increasing your confidence because as you look over your history, you look at all the things you've learned to do that you now take for granted that you can do, and having forgotten what it took to learn to do them, to bring them to the point of being automatic. So just adding to that list, or just writing that list, as a powerful reinforcer for confidence. It makes you realize that there's so much that you can do that you now take for granted, and there will be more things along the way as you live your life that you can do that you never dreamt beforehand that you could do, simply because you open up your ability to learn to yourself. And treat yourself. I often say to people in the learning process, and this applies for mind mastery too, treat yourself like a dearly beloved child. Learning isn't always easy, it isn't always fast, and it takes a lot of determination. And if you remember when you were learning to walk, you were learning to talk, you were learning to read and write, some of it may have seemed very difficult at the time, but now you're doing all those things as though you'd always known how. So obviously you can do that. There's a child, if it falters in when it's attempting to walk, if it falls down, it gets up and gives it another go. And it will do it as many times as it takes to be able to walk. It doesn't think, oh, I lack confidence in that. Oh, I don't think that I could do that. That looks awfully hard. It continues to strive no matter how many times it doesn't stand up, or doesn't walk, or doesn't say a word correctly. So treat yourself now like you did when you were a child, when you were in the learning process as a child. I can do this, it may take me a while. And look at that list and add to that list, and that will increase your confidence. Next question. Are you dealing with pain much less emotionally and more effectively now, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional? If you've eliminated fear from pain, if you've eliminated a lot of the anxiety about pain, you've eliminated 90%, 99% up to of the pain that you've had, to be able to be more comfortable and deal with whatever's left much more reasonably. Pain is going to be there in life. Life is not going to, by the nature of things, protect you from pain. In fact, if anything, it's going to rather tend to inflict it. So what you need to do is learn to deal with it in a healthy, positive way. You can command your subconscious at this point to help you deal with this pain more healthfully and appropriately. You can tell your subconscious to eliminate pain, whether it's physical, mental, or emotional, and deal with it in healthy, positive ways. Or eliminate it to the extent that you can handle it better. You're not going to live a life free of pain, but you're going to be able to deal with it much more comfortably and more healthfully by attitude, by not being afraid of it. All right? Now, I'm going to talk about the links that we gave you last week, and you can have a point for every one of those that you can say yes to if you're putting them in the chain for yourself. The link that I gave you, number 15, last week, was to eliminate worry and other stress-inducing attitudes. And we covered the subject of stress rather thoroughly. I'll just review momentarily with you some of the things that we discovered about stress, that stress responses can be high level or low level physical and high and low level mental. And stress higher than OSL results in either high level negative mental responses or typically a combination of both. Negative mental responses as well as high, by the way. A level of stress that is lower than the OSL results in low-level negative physical responses or low-level negative mental responses, or a combination of both. And remember that high-level negative responses result from the activities of the two branches of the autonomic nervous system. And the high-level negative responses occur when we're processing too much information at one time, or you might say systems overload, or when it's too low, when it's low negative physical and low level negative mental responses, there's too little stimulation. So we want to keep a nice balance and maintain the OSL. And if you are now eliminating stress-inducing attitudes, that should help, because the attitude has everything to do with the stress response. Remember, stress is exactly what I said last week. Your perception of the event is what makes it stressful. So, we are in control of our stress. The 16th link that I gave you was what I referred to as the problem-solving link. Are you thinking of new ways of working out problems, particularly old ones? An old problem is an old problem because the way you have been thinking about it. It is often the problem that is hypnotizing people. People become hypnotized by their problems. It becomes a focus and it crowds their minds and so on and so forth, and that's all they think about. So if you deal with problems much more effectively, and don't even think of them as problems, think of them as opportunities to be creative, opportunities to rise to a challenge or something like that, you're going to have a much better attitude and therefore more creative. And I'll tell you, the best problem solver you will ever find is your subconscious. So that was the 16th link, is to think of new ways of working out problems. And if you're doing that, you have a point and probably fewer problems. All right? By the way, how many of you did the little thing that I said, tell the problem to the tape recorder and come back? If you did that, you probably find out that, wow, do I sound like that? One lady said to me about that, she said, I didn't realize what a whiner I was. She said, I decided that was not a problem, that was me. And she just got rid of it. All right, the 17th link was to develop a no-fail attitude. Remember what I said, a failure is someone who follows the path of least persistence? You need to be persistent in order to succeed in many, many cases in your life. It's very seldom that you attempt to do something the first time and you're successful the first time. If you've attempted to do something and you haven't accomplished it, you're vastly better off than if you'd attempted to do nothing and succeeded. If you succeeded in doing nothing, no accomplishment, no learning, except that there's no satisfaction in there. And if at first you don't succeed, evaluate your progress, assess your methods, review all that you've learned from the experience, determine from that how to proceed. Progress towards a goal comes from practicing and applying knowledge. It comes from experience that you've gained. You become wise only through your willingness to submit yourself to the learning process. So if you develop a no-fail attitude, then you will jump into life with a willingness to learn, because that's what success is, learning. Actually, when I was very young, very, very young, I didn't know this lesson. I remember my mother taught me how to knit. And compared to my mother's knitting, mine was extremely slow and laborious. And I watched her fingers fly and I watched her knitting grow. And it was a little bit deterring for me. So as an impatient youngster, I didn't know quite how to catch up. So I thought of something and I went behind the couch and I stood on one end of my knitting and pulled on the other. And it got big, quite long that way. And then I took it to my mother and I said, look how much I have done. And she said, sit down. I'd like to talk to you. And she said, I would like to introduce you to someone. I looked around. She said, oh no. She said, he's not out there. He's in there. So who is it? She said, his name is Percy Reverence. And he's a very nice chap. Get to know him. Okay, develop a no-fail attitude. Also, I gave you the 18th link, and if you can say yes to putting this in, you have oodles more energy, and you love what you do, or at least like it a lot more. Take the effort out of action. And this goes back to the other time when I was talking about choice. Again, you don't have to do this. If you're going to do it, though, just do it. Don't struggle with it. Don't bemoan the fact that you chose to do this. Just do it. Take the effort out of action. If you realize, oh, I don't want to do this. I shouldn't have to do this. This is somebody else's job, or this takes too long, or this is too hard. All the things that I hear people say. I was at the supermarket one day and there was this young man who was loading packages, bags for people, and he was muttering under his breath, and every once in a while he'd drop something or he would load a bag wrong and he'd have to do it over again. And when my turn came and I watched him do it, I went over and I put my hand on his and stopped him and I said, I got a little eye contact and I said, either quit right now or just do it. And after he got over his surprise, he went, okay. And he just did it. And he packed my bags very nicely and very orderly and very quickly, and he was smiling the whole time he did it. And he offered to take them to the car for me. I said, no thanks, there's plenty of other people there you can just do it for. Because I didn't need his help. So, take the effort out of action. The 19th link is the one I gave you last time. The 19th link is the one I gave you last time, was to think about what you have to say and how you say it and how closely do they match. And to think about what you think about doing and how you act it out and how closely do they match. As I explained to you before, if your inner voice and outer expression don't match each other, you're going to feel very uncomfortable. Your communications are not going to be effective. You're going to be guilt-ridden because you've said and done things that you don't feel good about afterwards. Remember Gabriel Angel? I hope you never forget him. I won't. And Arlene, who washed walls at 2:30 in the morning because she thought she was going to do that, and therefore she had a contract with God. No. Think about what you have to say and how you say it. Think about what you think about doing and how you act it out. And then you won't be saying, gee, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. I have people come rushing into my office and go, so exasperated. And what's the matter? Oh, I'm so frustrated. I was going to do this and I was going to do that today and I haven't got half of it done and they're all upset. And I say, all you need to do is say to yourself when you're making your plans for the day is, if I have enough time, I will do this. If time allows, I will do that. Providing I'm not too tired, I'm going to see if I can accomplish this or that. And I've had people come into my office and be very sad because they said something to someone without thinking first, without formulating their communication, and it's caused a rift. Because the other person was so severely hurt, they don't even want to talk about it anymore, which is sad anyway. The people who created Neuro-Linguistic Program have a saying that they use, and I don't say that I believe in it absolutely, but it makes you think, and it's worth always a little thought to things. It says, the meaning of your communication is the response that you get. Good thought. Worth giving some time to and realize it's all what you do between here and here. All right, the next link that I gave you was to launch an enthusiasm campaign for yourself and everything you do. Put your spirit in it, put your heart in it, and life will have new dimensions for you. You'll enjoy doing everything you do more, even things that some people claim are routine things to do. Remember what I said before, and this was also related to taking the effort out of action, is when people tell me, oh, I've got to do this again. I've got to do that again. I've got to make the beds again. I've got to... You can't. You cannot do it that way. Not really. Take a different attitude. This is a new time. This is a whole new moment in time. You have never done it this time before. This is the first time you've done it this time. True. You never lived this moment before. You never took this breath before. I never said this before this moment, because this is new. I have said many things in the past, but I'm not in the past. I'm in the now. So, now launch an enthusiasm campaign for yourself in everything you do. I'll tell you something that will increase your enthusiasm. Put the spirit back into your life. Take away a lot of depression, a lot of sadness. Put away the newspapers and the television for a week. Don't look at them. Because I can tell you, you do that and take them out exactly the same day next year, and you probably get basically the same headlines. So you put the TV away for a week, put the newspapers away, you will be a lot less depressed. It will be easier to be enthusiastic, because most of those things are full of bad news, full of negative things, other people's troubles that you have nothing to do with and have nothing to do with you. issues and events in the world that make really, in the whole scheme of things, no difference to you. There's very little that you read in the newspapers or see on television that is relevant to you personally. Some people feel obligated to keep a handle on things, keep in touch with things. They feel out of it if they don't. Listen, you don't really need that. The time that you've spent watching television and reading the newspapers, put into yourself. Spend some time with yourself. Learn about yourself. Study your links. Think about how you can apply them to your life. One of the links that I gave you last week, remember the 21st link, was to become aware of your stress responses and how your attitude affects them. If you've done that, you have an extra link in the chain, and you have, of course, an extra point, and you're dealing with stress better. And you can have an extra point. I'll give you an extra point if you can now say you're functioning more at your OSL. All right? So now, I'm going to give you the new links in the chain for this week. The first one is to deal with doubt. About this time in the process of learning mind mastery, many people need this link. They may have had some results, but those results haven't always been consistent. And often, I would have to say probably most of the time, it's because of doubt. Doubt is a negative cloud that hangs over everything and prevents you getting results. Doubt, do you know what it is? Really? Honestly? You've let it interfere with your life and your progress many times. Do you know what it is? It's disbelief. When you don't believe something, if you have no, let's say, faith in it, your subconscious isn't going to do anything with it, because anything that goes against your belief systems contradicts your values. It contradicts the foundations of who you think you are and a whole lot of other things. So, doubt is a great stopper. I have given you in your workbook what we call the doubt sheet. And it will help you understand your doubt and ideally dissolve it. Sometimes doubt can be very helpful. If somebody said to you, can you do this or that, and if it doesn't make a lot of sense, you might say, I doubt that. Now, skepticism is something else. Skepticism is more, I call the thinking man's doubt. In other words, skepticism is, I'm not sure. I'm still curious. I have a lot of questions. I want to find out. So if somebody says to me, for example, about hypnosis, they say, I'm kind of skeptical. I say, good. Ask me away. Ask me all the questions you like. Because that means their mind is somewhat open. But if somebody says to me, oh, I doubt that. Closed mind, case closed, mind closed, don't want to know anymore, don't talk to me about it anymore, I doubt it, that's it, I do not believe. Your doubt will interfere with your progress. So, for example, you give yourself the command with the you control breathing, and you get to the count of 10, and you give yourself the command, and while you're doing it, you doubt that your subconscious will obey it. Or while it's being obeyed, you doubt that it's because you gave the command. I even have people say to me when they're getting wonderful results, they say, this is too good to be true. Or I can't believe this is happening. Oh boy. I know then they're going to need some very quick reinforcement. Doubt will definitely interfere, because the moment they say that, the subconscious goes, oh, I've done something I wasn't supposed to. The boss doesn't believe in this. It goes against belief systems. You will never act against your belief systems. If you do not believe that it is right to steal or to hurt people, you won't steal and you won't hurt people. But if you believe that it's okay to steal and okay to hurt people, I can tell you, you will do that. Your belief systems are what are kind of like the grounding for everything that you do. So, deal with your doubt. Complete the doubt sheet, and then we'll discuss it some more next week. That's a link in the chain. All right, next link that I'm going to give you is to use the single breath command now. Now, you've had some good practice. You've been doing the 10 breaths consistently, ideally, on a regular basis, and you've been telling your subconscious that it will obey your every positive conscious command. And you've been saying your magic words, I control, relax, or your name, or whatever it is that you use. So now you've conditioned your subconscious, and you've probably used the 10 breaths, and you've given commands for specific outcomes. For example, to be calmer, to remember something, to be more comfortable, to not do something, or to do something. Now, I want you to practice just the 10th breath. It's what I call the single breath command. You've conditioned your subconscious. Now it knows when you say, for example, I control, relax, as you take in that 10th breath. Your subconscious knows here comes an order. It's like the sergeant major coming in and saying, attention. That means that everybody stands at attention because they're going to get an instruction. So your subconscious is primed, you might say, for this. So now practice it, just the 10th breath. The 10th breath is the long breath. You don't even have to count now. You probably have a sense of the timing. I control, relax as you breathe in. Hold the breath. Give the command. Exhale and consider it done. Go about your business. Don't stand there thinking, I wonder if this is going to work. I'm going to wait and see if it works. Don't do that. Get the doubt out the way. Give the command. Consider it done. Go about your business. That's the single breath command. That's what it's all about, is being able to access your subconscious resources instantaneously, anywhere, anytime, under almost any circumstances. This is why mind mastery has some advantages over hypnosis. Hypnosis, you kind of have to take time out. You have to withdraw from the environment and focus your attention inwardly. And even if you're just using 3 breaths to get into the hypnosis, it takes a few moments to do that. And you have to sort of disengage from the external environment to do it. With the You Control command, it's only as long as it takes to take a deep breath and hold that breath, and while you're holding it, give the instruction and exhale and go about your business. You can do it anywhere, anytime, in traffic, at traffic lights, because you don't even have to close your eyes. That's one of the essences of mind mastery. Instantaneous access to the resources in your subconscious, anywhere, anytime, under almost any circumstances, for anything. So get used to doing that. It's going to come in handy. All right? Now, you've also in your workbook got paperwork called Controlling Control. And that's the next link in the chain of command. Controlling control. I would like for you to complete the paperwork on that and bring it with you next week, and then we'll discuss it more fully. But this particular link in the chain evolved from several different things. One is I found that many of my clients, after they had learned mind mastery, had become sort of instructors, you might say, of other people. Now they knew all this, and they were doing so well in their lives, they wanted to go around controlling other people with it. You should do this, and you should do that, and oh, this and that and the other about it. And often people resent that. Number one, they didn't ask you. Secondly, they're not going to take you seriously because it's all out of context for them. People aren't going to change unless they make the choice to do that. And they have to request help to make changes before they're likely to listen. There's an old saying, you know, about advice. Wise men don't need it, and fools don't heed it. So don't give it. Don't try to control other people. That's one of the reasons for the controlling control link. The other reason for that is many people that I have taught mind mastery become somewhat unrealistic about their expectations using mind mastery. I've had people being very frustrated because they still feel things. They experience stress or pain or frustration or sadness and depression, and all things that we are as humans heir to. And the whole idea of mind mastery is not to dehumanize you. It is to help you fully appreciate your humanness and use it in healthy ways. So don't control yourself and your emotions out of existence. You can deal with emotions healthfully. You don't have to stop yourself having them. You don't escape from life by escaping into yourself. You just deal with it inappropriately. So the whole idea is to control for yourself, remember, not control yourself. So controlling control is to help you maintain your humanness and fully appreciate it and live it to the fullest. But it doesn't mean you will not experience stress or pain or sorrow or any of those things. Again, it simply means you will deal with them and you will be more humane to yourself and ideally to others as well. So controlling control paperwork is in there. Go through it, answer all the questions, and bring it with you next week. And the next link that I'm going to give you, the last one this time, is thought control. I want you to practice thought control. Now this is a little bit more intense and more in depth actually than monitoring thoughts and canceling thoughts, because thought control is the ability to control the content of your thoughts and the direction of your thoughts at will. Let's do a little exercise so that you will understand what I mean. Right now, I would like for you to just think about what you see behind me on the blackboard. Just think about it. All right, was that difficult? No. All right, now I want you to think about this tree here. Just think about it. All right, now think about your right foot. Think about your right foot. Now think about your left foot. Now think about someone you love. Think about the GSR instrument in front of you. Okay, you can stop thinking about that now. It wasn't difficult, was it? Do you know the reason that it wasn't difficult? Let me explain it to you. A lot of people will say, for example, well, that was something I knew about. But the truth of the matter is, or also some people say, because you told me to. I think that's interesting. If you do as I tell you to that readily, then I know you're going to do all the links, right? Well, the truth of it is really that the reason that it wasn't difficult was because I did not give you very long to think about it. And that's the key to thought control. Because the more attention you pay to a thought, the more emotion it generates. And that's what empowers thought, is emotion. So, by nipping thoughts in the bud, as it were, or rechanneling them when it's appropriate, changing them when it's appropriate, will make a lot of difference in your overall experience. People will say to me, I can't stop thinking about such and such. Or I can't get this or that out of my mind. Well, of course, not only does that interfere with concentration, it really impairs concentration when your mind gets bogged down, literally, with a thought process that is totally irrelevant to what you're supposed to be doing or thinking. So, controlling your thoughts, developing thought control, means that you have control of the content and the direction of your thoughts simply by determining. So in other words, if you find yourself thinking about something that is not appropriate right now, because many times it may be appropriate to be thinking about something, but you should know when it is and when it isn't. And when it isn't, refuse to think about that now. You can delegate that thought to a later time, or you can say to your subconscious, forget that, I don't ever want to think that again. It's not relevant, or it's not relevant now. And then decide what to think about. So if you were reading a book and your mind went off and you would start thinking about a problem that you had, or somebody that you've had a problem with, or whatever it is that's occupying your thoughts when it doesn't belong there, then what you do is you say, no, I'm not thinking about that, I'm thinking about this, and you direct those thoughts, and you tell your subconscious what your thoughts are to contain. So practice thought control, and the more you do that, again, it will enhance your concentration, and you will do a lot more clear thinking, you will be much more creative, you'll be much more productive, and you will not get caught up in your thoughts, and your thoughts will not get caught up in your life. So the basic principle, remember, is the more attention you pay a thought, the more emotion it generates, and emotion is where thoughts get their power. Otherwise, they're just transient ideas. But when you pay attention to them, you generate emotion. If you nip it in the bud, it can't do that. But once the emotion has empowered the thought, it's going to be much more difficult to get it out of your mind, because it's supercharged with emotion. It's almost like magnetizing your concentration then and your attention. So, exercise thought control. Now, Those are the links that I'm going to give you up to now, and of course continue to practice all the links that I've given you so far, and we will review them again next week. Now I want you to do your biofeedback. Remember to keep notes on your progress and notes on how you're doing with your biofeedback. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.